Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Nick Talks. This week's amazing guest, and I know that every week I say amazing guest, but this week I actually mean amazing guest, is the footballer Matt Le Tissier. I have been following Matt probably from the early 90s because in the 90s I went through a football phase. I used to go, well, I didn't play football, I was always too lazy for that. But what I meant was I went to the pub every Saturday, Sunday to watch the football with my friends. I was a small Manchester United fan. So I used to watch Southampton play Manchester United and was always saying, that bloody Matt Le Tissier, don't give him the ball, don't give him the ball. So for many of years, he was like a mini arch enemy of mine whenever we played Southampton. And many football fans thought the same when they played Southampton as well. Matt's had a great football career, 8 caps for England, played for the same team, Southampton, all his professional career. Only ever missed one penalty out of 48, and was seen as one of the best midfielders for his generation. So thank you, Matt, for coming along, and it's a real pleasure having you here today.
My pleasure, mate.
My first question, you might not like, and it's going to make you think hard, and it's probably something you don't want to do. But my first question really is, what was that penalty you missed? Who was it against, and why did you miss it?
Well, it was the 24th of March, 1993. It was against Nottingham Forest, and Mark Crosley was in goal. And he got lucky. Simple as that.
Simple as that. Just so you're not taking any blame for that. You're just saying the goalie got lucky.
He actually made a nice little move where he feinted to go one side and then flung himself the other way, and he timed his little move just right, and I fell for it, and he saved it. But the worst bit about it was that he actually parried the ball straight back to me, and I think I was in so much shock that I'd actually missed a penalty that from about 7 yards out, I managed to hit the ball over the crossbar with my left foot. So I was more embarrassed about missing the rebound than I was about missing the penalty.
So what is it about penalties that is real? I mean, I understand it's stressful. You walk up to that spot, everyone's staring at you, all the pressure's on you. There's no pressure on the goalie because the goalie is expected to let it in. Why have England and why do some players fluff that moment when they're professional football players?
It's a good question, and I think for me, it's a question of mentality. I think the thing about taking penalties is you have to want to be there, and I think you can often watch penalty shootouts and you can see in people's eyes as they're walking up to the penalty spot, they don't want to be there. They're not looking forward to this moment. And if you go into it with that attitude, then there's a higher chance that you're going to miss penalties. And I think that's just been one of our massive problems, is that we haven't had enough players who look forward to taking penalties.
Mike Tyson said something similar about when he got into the ring in his early days. He said he'd look at the opponent and they looked scared stiff and they'd already been beaten before the bell had even rung. And I suppose that's why we have things like sports psychologists. And I think it's also harder these days because I'm not being disrespectful to modern day footballers, but life's a lot easier for them than it's ever been. I mean, they're multimillionaires at 21. What do they know about pressure and stress and life?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I do look back on my penalty taken and think that I was very much I don't know if it was something to do with my ego, my big headedness, but I loved the fact that a penalty is being taken. I'm the one taking it, and everybody in the stadium is looking at me right at that moment. And I enjoyed that pressure. And for me, scoring goals was the best thing about being a professional footballer. So a free shot from 12 yards against a goalkeeper was the easiest chance that I was going to get to score a goal in the whole match. So that's kind of why I looked forward to it. And that was my mentality going into it. And I don't think enough players take that mentality into the penalty taking.
No, very, very interesting. What's your take on the wages now, the salaries of footballers? Because I take it you weren't paid 72 million a year to play.
Not quite, no. I actually, I think when I retired in 2002, I was on £3,500 a week. which is a very lovely wage. Don't get me wrong, but it's probably a lot less than what a lot of people thought I was on at that stage. But at the end of the day, I signed those contracts with Southampton Football Club because I was happy to. So I have no complaints about the money that I earned during my career, and I have no complaints about the players earning the money that they do these days. I think it's a bit strange that football clubs would choose to pay that amount of money. But I don't blame the players for 1 second for taking it. I mean, who's going to go into a job and go, actually, yeah, don't give me that much money, I'll take a bit less? There's not many people that do that.
Oh, of course, and it's market forces. I understand that, and I don't blame the players. But do you think those high wages are damaging the game in any way?
Yeah, I do. I do think there's. I think that not only are they damaging the game, I think sometimes they damage the individual players themselves, because I think they've got access to far too many funds, and with that, it brings great temptations. And some players are not able to resist those temptations. And I think especially for the younger players, I do think that there should be some kind of limit as to how much money they can get their hands on, and perhaps a portion of those wages should be deferred until they're a little bit older and a little bit more sensible to be able to deal with those kind of figures that are coming in on a monthly basis.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. The ages of some of the football players who deserve the money because it's open market forces, but
Yep.
we can see it in the papers every couple of months. It destroys some players. It's just too much too soon. They develop a godlike complex. You know, we have football players in court almost monthly now for rape, and it's that Midas touch. They get what they think they want, and what they get is killing them and destroying them.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And it's the other point that I'd probably make is that sometimes having so much so young as well just takes away a little bit of the edge of players when they don't really have to work hard anymore. They know not going to have to work another day in their life once they finish playing football. So why are they going to push themselves? Why are they going to? Because that's why I think you see so many young players who come through. Really exciting, and you think, wow, this is going to be the next big thing, and then all of a sudden they kind of tail off and they end up not quite getting to where you thought they were going to get to, and you have to look at that and think, well, is that because all the money that they've got, it just takes the edge off of them, and they don't really then have the desire to go and want to make themselves as best as they can be. And obviously there are players like Ronaldo and players like that who are incredibly professional and will get every ounce out of the ability that they've got. But there's a lot at the other end of the spectrum that kind of fall by the wayside, having showed so much potential, and then really don't go on to fulfill the things that we expect of them in their careers.
Am I right in saying that sounds a lot like what Rocky in the movie says, "Eye of the tiger"? You lose that drive, you lose that I don't know what it is, but he calls it the eye of the tiger.
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely right. It is that inner burning desire, certainly that I had as a kid to want to be a professional footballer. And that didn't lessen for me during my career because I didn't have enough money to last me for the rest of my life and never have to work again. So I think there is definitely some merit in that argument.
Yeah. Why am I going to go into that tackle 110% when I could break my leg? I'm already a multi-millionaire. Why am I going to run the length of that pitch for a hopeless ball? I'm already a multi-millionaire. Does it matter? And I think that sort of attitude sneaks in so slowly, no one sees it.
No, I think it's right. It's something that's never really talked about amongst pundits on the television either.
Yeah. And you, from what I read, started your football career on the YTS scheme, which for people who don't know, that was a government scheme in the 80s because unemployment was so high to get kids straight from school into any job, and the government would pay the employer. Was it about £40 a week, something like that, just to get you just to give you a job?
That would have been quite high. I was on £26 a week when I first started. So we did an apprenticeship that was meant to last 2 years, but it really kind of lasted till your 18th birthday, which for me was only about 16 months. So the first year I was on £26 a week, and the second year I got a massive rise to £35 a week. But I was only on that for about 4 months, and then I signed my first professional contract at Southampton in 1986, which was a 2-year contract, which I signed for £100 a week for the first year, and I got a huge rise to £120 a week in my second year.
And that makes you work hard. When you've earned nothing and you're still working full time and you have drive, you have ambition, and you know you're only going to get more when you prove yourself and you push yourself. That's how we created in the 80s brilliant football players like you.
No, thank you very much, mate.
Right, let's change the subject because I'm not a huge football fan, and that's probably the limit of my football conversation just there in those 5 minutes. So I don't want to embarrass myself anymore. As you probably know, I set a charity up 10 years ago, and I was sacked from it 2 years ago for criticising Black Lives Matter because they'd just come to prominence in the UK. I'd not really heard of them before. And we had the mainly peaceful riots in London that injured 26 police officers. So I Googled Black Lives Matter and read what they put on their own website and went, I don't like the sound of these guys. And because I've spent 20 years stopping kids getting involved in crime, campaigning to get more fathers back in the home, and trying to solve social problems, I thought I need to speak out on this because everybody thinks these guys are superheroes. But when you read the website, you read that the Marxists, they want to tear down capitalism. But the big thing for me was they wanted to, and the phrase was, disrupt the Western nuclear family. And I thought about that for several hours. And what that actually means is we need to get rid of more fathers in the home. And that's when I went, no, I'm not having this. So I spoke up, I wrote a blog, put it on LinkedIn to generate some discussion. Someone copied the link, put it on Twitter. I got sacked by friends of the charity I set up, and the rest, everybody knows the story. Then I fought back. Within 5 weeks, I made the board resign and I got my job back. But it was absolutely horrendous 5 weeks. You know, I sound a bit glib sometimes, as if I fought back and I won and I can take people on, but I was almost a destroyed man. It took me another year to get over the damage that did. So at the same time, you had something very similar because you worked for Sky Sports at the time as a pundit, watching football games, commenting on the game. So could you tell me what happened to you?
So we turned up in the studios one day, and as we were about to go on air, probably about a minute or two before we were due to go on air, our producer came in with these Black Lives Matter badges, and he said, can you guys put these badges on? And I looked at it and I went, wow, because I'd done the same as you. I'd gone and had a look at what they were all about, and I wasn't comfortable with it. And I looked at him and I said, do I have to put this badge on? And he looked at me and he just went, it's probably in your best interest if you do. And that was it. And I was like, and this is like, we're going on air in a few seconds. So I didn't really have time to think too much about it. So I put it on, and I just felt uncomfortable the whole afternoon. I wasn't happy about it. So at the end of the show, when the show finished, I went to the producer and I said, look, I felt really uncomfortable wearing that badge. I know what that organization is. I know what they stand for. I don't agree with it. So I won't be wearing that badge ever again. If you want me to wear a different badge next week, the kick racism out, any of badges of that description, then I'm more than happy to do that. Apparently that kind of then blew up in the newspapers, and I was labelled as a racist for not bowing down to the Black Lives Matter movement, and nothing could be further from the truth, really, for those people who know me. But I stood up for what I felt was right, and I didn't wear that badge ever again. A lot of people still were wearing it. I didn't. And whether or not that had anything to do with the fact that I lost my job a couple of months later, only Sky will be able to tell you that.
If that wasn't the reason you lost your job, it would have contributed to the reasons you lost your job. So you're right. Let's not, jump to big conclusions because we don't know. Only Sky Sports know the reason why they let you go, but it would have absolutely contributed, especially as Sky Sports then for another 2 years promoted Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, it didn't stop, and eventually the truth comes out. We've seen what they spend their money on, and all that kind of stuff. So I think I feel, and I'm sure that you do, that we are thoroughly vindicated in the stands that we took.
No, absolutely. I mean, you look what's happened now. Tens of millions of dollars missing, multi-million pound mansions bought for individuals. The fraud is horrendous. Lots of the chapters across America, people in there have been arrested for prostitution, for gun crime, for paedophilia, for rape. And you look at the organization, you think this was just a huge scam. It was a huge Ponzi scheme. And at that time in 2020, it felt like a revolution was coming, and everybody was terrified to put their head above the parapet. Now, I was, I think I was probably one of the first to do something like that, and I had no idea at the time what was coming for me. And I'll be completely honest, if I knew what was coming for me, would I have wrote that article? And the truth is, I really don't know. I don't know if I'm that brave, but I'm glad it all happened. I'm glad it happened the way it did. I'm a changed person now. But you're right. It's about standing up for what you believe in, because if you don't stand up for what you believe in, what are you going to stand up for?
Yeah, no, absolutely. If you don't stand up for it, no one else is going to do it for you.
No, and that's how we've got to some of these awful atrocities throughout human history. People always ask, how did the Nazi concentration camps happen? Why did the German people allow that? Well, they allowed it one small step at a time. They should have said, no, not in my name, a decade before it ever happened, because this was a slow process. And what I didn't want to be is one of those people asking that question 10 years from now. Why didn't we stop Black Lives Matter? Why didn't we stand up for fathers? Why didn't we stand up for capitalism? Because look what's happening now. And cowardice is an easy drug sometimes for your own personal convenience.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we have bigger things to worry about, and it's society, it's family, it's community, and that's really why I stood up.
Yeah, and I think that whole stuff, I think, it's become quite clear. It's part of a bigger agenda. It's obviously a paid for political movement to sow division in people, and we know that the people who wish to have total control and power over the world, we know that one of the tactics they will use to do that is divide and conquer, and that's why organisations such as Black Lives Matters exist, and I think we know the people that are behind it.
And I'm glad you said divide and conquer, because we've seen it throughout society in every group: white against black, black against Asian, straight against gay, gays against queers and transgender, Christians against Muslims, Muslims against Hindus. The list goes on and on and on. And we have to ask ourselves, why is this happening now, when we're the luckiest people in the world ever to exist? We've never had it so good, and yet we're complaining all the time, but it's never been this good ever.
The problem I've really found, Nick, if I'm honest, in my life, I've been around 54 years almost, and I've seen very little racism, very little actual racism, really small amounts. And to be honest, I think, yes, there will always be a tiny minority of people who are racist. And I don't think any sort of campaign that you do will ever get them to change their mind. However, I believe the vast, vast majority of people are not racist and are good people and couldn't care what color each person was. What really matters is the content of their character. And I think that's what I believe the vast majority of people are like.
No, I completely agree. And part of the problem is we've now redefined the word racism. And racism now basically means hurty words. So I can call you an old sod. I can call someone else a ginger idiot. I can call someone else a small fool. They're all okay. But if you use the word black, then all of a sudden that's an horrendous slur. So what we're really arguing about now is just insults. And humans always insult each other It just happens that at the moment we've got certain insults which are taboo now, which never used to be, but are now. And I mean, I'm not saying this is pleasant. This is still hurtful behaviour and it's still antisocial. And I'm still against people using slurs and calling each other names. It's still very childish. But I don't class that as racism. Racism is when I stop you working. Racism is when I go out with a baseball bat looking for someone of a different group to beat up. When I stop you buying a house, when I'm affecting your life, something tangible. That's racism. Calling hurty words is just antisocial behaviour.
Yeah, and I think I grew up in an era where I was taught that sticks and stones may break my bones, and names will never hurt me. And I have to say, it's one phrase that has really stuck with me throughout my life. You know, I took a lot of abuse from terraces down the years, and you just gotta laugh it off.
But that's part. Isn't that part of the game? Isn't that part of the entertainment of football, where
Yeah,
it's tribal, where
and it's
we have a go
character
at the other
building.
side? Yes.
Yeah, it's character building as well, you know, and you have to learn to be mentally strong and not get offended by words. I think this is one of the biggest problems for me over the last few years, and it started with political correctness back in the 90s. I think it was just an absolute joke. And I believe in a society, if we all had that sticks and stones mentality, I think we would be much better off as a society. And not only that, is what you'll find is when people call you names, if you react to it, they'll call you more names because they know they're getting to you.
It's the reaction they want.
And if you don't react to it, do you know what happens? They stop because they know they can't get to you. So the easiest way to deal with that problem is don't react to name calling. Don't react to it. Let it pass you by. It's childish, it's immature, treat it as such, and we all get on with our lives in a much better place.
And isn't that the lessons we tell kids every single day? Is ignore the name calling, sticks and stones. They're idiots. Just ignore them and move on. I mean, I learned this lesson as a child because up to the age of 13, I had quite a bad stutter. So I'd been in school, you know, Nick, your turn to stand up and read certain passage, and I would stand up and go, it's okay, Nick, yeah, sit down, next. So they always made me do it, which at the time sounded cruel, but even then I understood why they made me do it, because the teacher said to me, I'm never missing you out, because in real life, your affliction, you won't be able to be missed out. So I'm going to make you do it, even if it's only for a couple of seconds. And I gradually stopped by 13. And as you can imagine, kids are cruel. I was constantly the butt of jokes. And I learned to deal with it by being the first person to take the mickey out of my stuttering. Because once you take the power away from the person and you laugh at yourself, what have they left with?
They have nothing, and they have nothing left. That was the other point that I was exactly going to make, because I used to do the same thing about my nose. You know, I got a big nose. I was teased about it from a very early age. And I worked out that actually, if I take the mickey out myself, it leaves them with nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? And it just takes, you're right, it takes all the power away, and it's a brilliant tactic to use. And the more people that would understand that, the far easier and the far better our society would be.
And then it toughens you up, and it toughened you up mentally. And that probably contributed to your fantastic penalty record. The fact that when you walked up to that penalty spot, you were tougher inside than most of the other people, because you had to deal with, and we've all got flaws and we've all got problems, and life is hard for many people, but sitting back and crying about it and going, I'm a victim, I'm being bullied, doesn't get you anywhere. It just makes you weak and pathetic.
I agree.
No, yeah, and that's exactly what I tell kids for the last 20 years. Stop being a victim, because it gets you nowhere in life. So a lot, I think we've been talking about then, you know, a lot of it comes down to our promotion of free speech, because I know that you're a big advocate for free speech, because in a free society, it means free speech. Even if you're wrong in what you say, people still should have the right to be able to say it, and then to be corrected by somebody else.
Absolutely.
How do you get new ideas unless you talk about your wrong ideas for someone else to show you where you're going wrong? That's what a free society is all about.
Exactly right. And I've never professed to be right on everything that I've said. I've had an opinion on it, but I've always taken the stance that if somebody can come to me with enough evidence that makes me go, oh, hang on a minute, yeah, your side of the argument makes much more sense than my side. I'm happy to bow down to you here and go, fair play. I was wrong, and I'll change my mind. And I think that's where in our society today, we don't have enough people, enough leaders, enough people in positions of power who are actually prepared to be man enough or woman enough to actually say, yeah, do you know what? I got that one wrong. I'm going to change my mind on that because I think you're right. A society that can openly debate things is a much better society, and not one that is promoting censorship and silencing of any opinion that goes against the mainstream narrative, the government narrative, or what the BBC and Sly News and all that kind of stuff. All those lot want to try and push agendas on you, and it's just propaganda being spouted at you through the television the whole time. It's not a world that I want to live in, and I think we need to stand up. The more of us need to stand up and fight for free and open debate.
And I would go one step further and say it's even slightly worse than that terrible situation you just painted. And it's slightly worse because we're now actually given our opinions. This is the opinion you must have. So it's not even just shut up, you're wrong. It's shut up, you're wrong, and start preaching this mantra because this is the opinion you should have.
And that's what I've now come to believe. I've now realised that that's what the television has been used for. It is unfortunately become a brainwashing tool and tells you how to think. It doesn't give you the news. It tells you what to think about subjects. It tells you how to think, and you've got to think the way that the BBC or the government tell you, because let's be honest, they're controlled by the same people.
That's always been the case. TV, media has always been there as a type of propaganda, because thousands of years ago we had this. The tribal leader would want his views propagated. There was no discussion because we needed to keep society or keep a tribe harmonious. So you couldn't have 72 different versions. That had to be what the tribal leader said. So I do get it to a certain extent. But what's happened this last 10, 15 years is the internet and social media. So it's a lot harder now to be able to control the narrative, and people can see through it. So that doesn't mean what we used to do has to stop, and it doesn't mean it has to continue. It just means we have to come to a better way of dealing with it in this new age. And I haven't got the answer. I mean, this is going to be a complicated, decades and decades is going to take us to get through this and understand what the new norm is with this technology. It's extremely complicated.
It is extremely complicated, but I think the one thing that has to happen for our society to be better and to move forward is for the current political system to be brought down and a new system put in place that doesn't mean that you've got to be from a certain subset of society to be able to make it to the higher echelons of government, because I have come to believe over the last few years that the people in government are not serving their people. I believe the people in government are only there to serve the people above them and not to do us any favours. And yet we're the ones that elect them, and we're the ones that pay them, which makes it incredibly frustrating.
I think part of the problem there is professional politicians. We used to have miners, we used to have milkmen, we used to have school teachers who would then go into politics. All we have now are people who wake up at 15 years old and go, I'm going to be a politician, then do A-levels with media studies and politics, then go to university. While they're at university studying politics, they then meet an MP or write to an MP and become one of their assistants or researchers. Leave university, then do a poorly paid job for an MP, then get a safe seat, then get elected. And it's like, no life experience. I don't understand anything in the real world. It becomes a job. And that job is, I need to shout the loudest that the other people are Nazis and bad, and I need to make sure my party stays in power, even if they do the most horrendous things of incompetent. And it's like, none of this benefits anybody in the country.
Absolutely, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's not enough people with proper real life experiences at the highest levels of government that know what it's like to be a normal person. And unfortunately, I think that the system is become so corrupt. The wastage of our taxes is probably the biggest scandal of all time. The amount of taxes that there are now, that we didn't have 50, 60 years ago. And still we just get people going, oh, well, the NHS is still underfunded, and the roads aren't good enough in this country, and the infrastructure is poor. And you think, well, you're getting enough money, you're getting way too much money, and I believe that the government should be a far smaller entity, and I believe that the people will spend money more responsibly than what the government will do, so the taxes should be lower.
I worked for local government for nearly a decade, and I can tell you hand on heart, the incompetence is something you would not. I could tell you stories now.
Oh, I believe.
And it just goes beyond you can possibly imagine the incompetence. I'm not always fully agree with people who think it's complete corruption and they're skimming money off the top. It really is pure incompetence on a mass scale, because all these people who work for government, none of them refer to the money they spend as taxpayers' money. It's always the budget. We used to get special grants when I worked for Manchester Council from the government, and we didn't call it a budget. We used to call it funny money, because where did that money come from? Oh, we don't know. It was some pot from the government, and we called it funny money, and we'd spend it with no idea and no connection to this is taxpayers' money. And what we need to do is every budget in every government department needs to be held accountable, and we need to hold civil servants accountable for every penny they spend.
Absolutely.
Because at the moment we don't.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest wastes of money is at the end of March every single year. I don't know if you know this. Obviously the financial budgets for every department, for every project ends at the end of March, and you get your new budget the 1st of April. So if you don't spend all your money by the end of March,
that cut your budget for next year.
They cut your budget for next year, so you have an incentive. So if you've got 50 grand left over, rather than saying, look what I've saved this year, they go, oh, we're going to knock 50 grand off your budget next year. So they waste it. I know people who've bought £17,000 coffee machines for the office because they had to get rid of the budget.
Wow.
So even the whole process is just incompetent. None of it works. And then we're talking about taxes. So do you know why we pay income tax?
Go on.
Income tax was a temporary tax introduced for the Napoleonic War. And it was introduced as, this is only to fund this war. And it never went away. And we're looking at 200 years later, we're still paying for the Napoleonic War with income tax.
And how many more taxes have they added on top of that since then? Value added tax,
Everything. They tax everything.
Council tax.
Yeah.
Tax on petrol, tax on, it's just, honestly, it's disgusting what this government do.
I think the role of the Prime Minister and of government should be several things that we need. Defence, which they can't even protect our channel, but defence, there's other things they need to do. But one of the biggest jobs a Prime Minister should be doing is keeping government out of almost everybody else's lives.
Yeah.
Government interferes too much with how we raise our children, what we eat, where we go, what we do. I mean, look at what they did over COVID. You can't go here, you can't go there. We need government out of our lives. Otherwise, it beggars the question, are we really a free people when the government can tell us what we can and can't do?
No, we're not a free people. And I think one of the simplest things that kind of I tell people to get them to understand just how corrupt and stupid this government are is that during COVID, they shut gyms and they kept McDonald's open. Now, come on. I mean, this is a virus apparently that only affects you if you're not particularly healthy. So what we're going to do, we're going to shut the gym so you can't be healthy, and we're going to keep McDonald's open so you get even more unhealthy. So come on. I mean, it's not rocket science. This is a joke.
It's yeah. I mean, the first couple of months of COVID, I could understand and I could let go some mistakes because it was new, it was different. The world was scared. They didn't know what to do. So
The world was scared because of the media.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Let's make that clear.
Yeah, we looked at the pictures from Italy and from China. It was all social media driven. But I get that. But I don't want to be tough on politicians. I could give them a bit of leeway at the very beginning. But it became, after a couple of months, it became quite evident of how dangerous this was. But yet they still continued with it for another year and a half.
No, I think there was evidence early enough from the Diamond Princess cruise ship, which told everybody that this wasn't the dangerous pathogen that they thought it was, and that was before we did any lockdown. So I have zero intolerance to any of the politicians who made those decisions, because there was evidence around if they chose to look for it.
Like I say, everyone is entitled to different opinions.
Absolutely.
And to say what they want, and it doesn't mean that anyone has to agree with me or agree with you, because that's what free speech is about.
And that's right. You're never going to meet anybody in your life who agrees with you on every single subject. It's just not ever going to happen.
And how boring would that be? How boring would that be in life?
Probably boring. So you have to understand that that's what free speech is about. So you can have these discussions, not get upset with each other, but can have a grown-up conversation where you give an opinion, I give an opinion, and then if we don't agree at the end of it, we just go, oh well, never mind, we've got different opinions, crack on.
Exactly. And the people you disagree with on one particular subject, you'll find out you have so many other subjects and topics you're completely in line with, because humans are complicated. We're not the same. We have different ideas, opinions, life experiences, upbringings, heritage, culture. So there's bound to lots of things we agree with and not agree with.
Yeah.
My final question really is, what price have you paid for speaking up and being a free speech advocate? Have you lost any personal friends? Because I have.
I haven't actually. Oh, not that I'm aware of. I think there are people that disagree with me vehemently who are good friends of mine. But as I said, we have a conversation, we disagree, and we go, oh well, we disagree. We can still be mates. It's not a problem. And so I've managed to keep those situations in check, and I've managed to keep my cool when I'm passionate about something, but I also am passionate about free speech, and I understand that people are going to have different opinions to me, so that's absolutely fine. So I haven't lost any kind of personal, real close personal friends over COVID at all. I probably did lose my job, if Sky are honest. I think I've resigned as an ambassador at Southampton Football Club, which was my decision. So I can't really say that I've lost that because I spoke out. It was my decision to resign.
Did you do that to protect the club you love?
That's exactly what I did it for.
Yeah,
exactly what I did it for, and that's the only reason that I did it. It cost me a little bit of money. It wasn't a huge job. It wasn't something that I relied on in my life to pay my mortgage, which I still have. So yeah, I lost in terms of work. I've lost a few jobs. I actually also turned down. This wasn't really to do with freedom of speech, really. Well, I kind of guess it was a little bit, but the PlayStation game, FIFA, the EA Sports game, the very popular FIFA game. My agent came to me about, I think it must have been about 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago now, and said they're doing a Legends section on the FIFA game, and they'd like to use your image, and here's a 6-year deal, and would you would you be interested in signing up to that? And it would have meant that I would have had to have done not only my image, but I would have had to done a little bit of PR for the game, and a bit of PR for FIFA. So I've probably spent the last 3 years on my social media account giving a lot of criticism to FIFA, who, let's be honest, are not the most trustworthy organisation in the world. I think there's been a lot of corruption, a lot of bribery allegations in FIFA, which have all quite a lot of them have gone to court, been proven. And so I've been calling out FIFA for their corruption over the last few years. And so when I went back to my agent, I said, well, I don't really want to have anything to do with FIFA, if I'm honest. I've just spent the last few years slagging them off on my social media account. I don't really want to have anything to do with them. And obviously my agent was a bit disappointed, because he's obviously missing out on his cut of the deal. And he said, is there no way that we can kind of get around it with the FIFA thing? So I said, well, I'm not backing down on the FIFA stuff. So if you can do me a deal with EA Sports, which means I don't have to promote anything to do with FIFA and do any work for them, then I'll sign it. And so a couple of weeks later, the offer was withdrawn, and so I didn't sign that contract with FIFA or with EA Sports.
Good for you, because it's talk's cheap. But when people dangle money in front of people, we've got Gary Neville going to Qatar.
As we've just seen with Gary going to Qatar, yes.
So, once you dangle money in front of people, it's amazing, especially socialists. It's amazing how many socialists go, oh, thank you for the money, comrade.
Champagne socialists you're talking about there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my very, very last question is, after everything we've talked about, everything you've done, some of the turmoil you've been through, do you sleep okay at night?
I sleep great at night. I've stood up for what I believe in. I don't suggest that I've got everything right over the last couple of years. There have been maybe one or two mistakes that I probably shouldn't have done, which I apologise for when I realised that that wasn't the right thing to do, which I think is the way that people should behave. And I feel like I can walk out my front door and I hold my head up high, and I get a lot of people coming up to me in everyday life, in the real world, not in that social media fake world. In the real world, I get a lot of people coming up and thanking me for sticking my head above the parapet and saying what a lot of people are thinking.
Fantastic. As long as you can sleep at night, your conscience is clear. And it's the same with me. I sleep really well at night as well. And I don't regret anything I did, anything I've said, because I know that I meant it. I meant it then, and I mean it now. So I sleep really well. Do you know what? It's been a pleasure talking to you, Matt.
Thanks, Nick. Likewise, mate.
I'd like to end with an apology of all those things I called you during the 90s when you were playing against Manchester United, when I screamed at TV in the pub. So I again, because I'm a nice guy, I'll apologise for that here and now to your face.
There's no problem. I didn't take it personally. And if I had have heard it, I still wouldn't have taken it personally.
But thank you for coming on my podcast. It was fantastic speaking to you. Thank you so much, and I'll speak to you soon.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.